I'm Jillian Lester, Dean of Columbia Law School, and it really is my great pleasure to preside over this gathering tonight. I'm so pleased to be with you, and I want to, first of all, acknowledge the wonderful opportunity that this provides us to reconnect with one another, to visit with old friends and new friends, where our common link is Columbia Law School and the community that it helped to create. I'm deeply grateful, and also want to acknowledge, before we move further in the proceedings, I want to acknowledge and thank George Madison, who 1 year ago, sitting here in the front, 1 year ago, a little more than a year ago, when we had our first gathering of the Columbia Law School Alumni of Color, appeared before the group as our keynote speaker, our inaugural keynote speaker. But George was much more than a keynote speaker. George was also a leader in identifying the need, in identifying the value, in reaching out to the community, and in really creating a presence of this community of alumni of color. And for example, he was George who devised the idea of creating a scholarship, and here we are 1 year later, we've created a scholarship, the Eric Holder Jr. Scholarship. And so that's already a wonderful success and auspicious beginning to this group. You would be hard-pressed to find a lawyer more committed to building opportunities for the next generation of lawyers than Sheila Abdus-Salam, class of 1977, whose incredible body of work and whose spirit we celebrate this evening. Sheila Abdus-Salam was a luminary in the law, the first African-American woman to serve on New York State's Court of Appeals in its 170-year history. 24 years on the bench. That also includes serving as a trial judge at the State Supreme Court in Manhattan, and later as an associate justice of the court's appellate division. An assistant attorney general in the civil rights and real estate financing bureaus of the New York State Attorney General's office. Lawyer for East Brooklyn Legal Services Corporation, and later general counsel to the city's Office of Labor Services. A graduate of Columbia Law School, where she was Charles Evan Hughes Fellow. As her equally accomplished and distinguished classmate Eric Holder once recalled, even during their years in law school together back in the 1970s, he could tell that Sheila was headed for great things. As a student, as an attorney, and as a judge, she has always been a champion for the cause of justice, he told Metropolitan Black Bar Association in 2010. Sheila was special. I'm honored to be with you here tonight to pay tribute to Sheila, to her professional achievements, to be sure. How can we ignore them? But also, unavoidably, to her kindness, her modesty, and her unfailing generosity. Sheila was a great friend to many of you. She was a great friend to me. And she was a great friend to Columbia Law School. While Sheila's stellar legal career and service to the judiciary are well known, her dedication to the law school for many years form an important part of her legacy. She was a regular presence on campus and participated in the life of the school in so many ways. She was a member of the law school's Board of Visitors for many years, for more than a decade. She volunteered for reunion committees. She returned regularly to campus to counsel and speak with students about careers in public service. The students would call her on a Monday and say, well, our event, we've been organizing it, it's on Friday, Somebody was supposed to call you but forgot, but we've got you listed on the program, and Sheila would be there. Thick and thin, she showed up. She was present. Went above and beyond, especially for students. She served as such an important, inspirational role model. Surely that was a burden for her to time and time again come, but she wore it very lightly and was a remarkable guiding light for generations of students. Continues to be a remarkable guiding light for our students. 4 years ago, we awarded Sheila the Wien Prize for Social Responsibility, which, as many of you know, honored alumni who put their resources and legal skills for the public good, and who will serve as I mentioned, as she has served, as role models for the profession and for our students. Tonight, we're honored to be joined by Sheila's colleagues and friends who will pay tribute. Judge Jenny Rivera, class of '93, Judge Rowan D. Wilson, Justice Rolando Acosta, class of '82, and former Attorney General of New York State, Robert Abrams. Thank you for being here with us tonight to pay tribute to Sheila and her legacy. I'd also like to acknowledge Sheila's husband, Reverend Jacobs, who is also with us this evening, sitting among our distinguished guests. As well as so many of Sheila's colleagues who came here tonight to be part of this celebration of Sheila's life and accomplishments and presence in our lives. Your attendance, your tribute to Sheila, and the friendship and fellowship that this evening represents is a source of great pride, and it's my tremendous honor to thank you for coming and to usher in the program. So with that, I will leave the podium with one final word, that Sheila was part of our family. We are all part of a family that she helped to tie, the binds that she, the threads that pulled us together are Sheila. She's woven in all of our lives. And I want to acknowledge that and take a moment all to thank you for being part of this moment.
Well, I'm so glad to see all of you here. Here we go. We're playing musical chairs, as you can see.
We're doing this alphabetically.
Right. He's just trying to hide behind Abrams.
I'm just glad we have Conrad and now Professor Smith to call him.
Let's see if I can channel him for this one. All right, well, first I want to thank Jillian and all the wonderful folks in Alumni Relations, particularly Fran Williams, Ryan Carnes, for making this event possible. Also want to thank Reverend Greg Jacobs, our class of '77, and Sheila's husband for helping us pull together this wonderful panel. And of course, all of you for being here. So let's give yourselves a round of applause. I'm Conrad Johnson. I'm a clinical professor of law. I've been on the faculty of the law school since 1900. And my job here tonight is to moderate a conversation about our dear friend, the Honorable Sheila Abdul Salam. On our panel, we have Judge Jenny Rivera of the New York Court of Appeals, Judge Rowan Wilson, New York Court of Appeals, Rolando Acosta, presiding justice of the Appellate Division, First Department, and Robert Abrams, four-term New York Attorney General, partner at Strzok & Levin. Before we begin, I want to enter into a stipulation. I want to stipulate that we are all in august company here tonight, that this is an extraordinarily talented, accomplished, well-connected group. Between you, we have more titles than you can shake a stick at. And were this a more formal event, where our accomplishments were less known and maybe not universally respected. I would flawlessly stick to all the honorifics that apply to all of the people that I'm about to introduce and to all of you. But we are among friends. And indeed, it would betray the spirit of this event, in fact, the goal of this event, which is to create community, to reconnect with old friends, to connect with new friends and make new friends, and to honor the spirit of our dear friend, Sheila Abdul Salam. So I'm going to skip the honorifics as much as possible, but I stipulate my respect for everyone. This is, as Jillian said, a celebration through conversation of Sheila's life. We're not going to try and duplicate the amazing service that took place at St. John the Divine that many of you may have attended, that was attended by thousands, literally thousands of people. Rolando spoke, many others spoke, just in incredible terms. It was one of the first times, actually a person was sitting next to me, a friend of mine, turned to me and said, you know, usually I come away from these events and I feel worse, and today I feel better. And I thought that was the nicest thing you could say in response to that wonderful event. It is hard to have an event without Sheila here. I can't remember a Robeson Gala without Sheila patiently waiting for people to stop talking so she could start dancing. There's going to be no dancing here tonight, at least as far as I know, although I was encouraged when I heard the music when I came in. But there will be plenty of conversation. And we need to have that conversation so we can keep her spirit alive among us. So we're going to start the panel. We're going to have two questions. We're going to handle them one at a time for 5 minutes each. And we're going to, the first question is talk a little bit about your experience with Sheila during the time when you knew her, her accomplishments during that period of time. And we're going to begin by sort of going chronologically through her career, beginning with the man who encouraged her to join the judiciary, Bob Abrams.
Well, first, what an honor it is to be part of this very distinguished panel on such an important occasion, to remember the life and the good deeds and the good works of Sheila Abdul Salam. A brilliant woman, an elegant woman, somebody who was so humble, who displayed calm and grace at all times, had fantastic judicial temperament, fairness. I saw it early on. I became Attorney General in 1978. I got elected in 1978. I was the first Democrat elected Attorney General in New York State in 40 years. A lot of people, when they hear that, they're a little startled. And because I was the first new Attorney General in 23 years and a progressive person, I had some ambition for the office. I wanted to reshape that office. I wanted to bring special kinds of people to that office who shared my vision of making it an advocate for the people of the state of New York and the needs of people. And one of the important things I wanted to do is make that office more reflective of the population of the state of New York, because frankly, I was appalled when I got to the office and I saw so few minority lawyers in the Attorney General's office. And so I was determined to go and recruit quality people in general and in particular from the minority community. And Sheila was one of my early hires. She joined the office right after I became Attorney General. She spent 3 years in East Brooklyn Legal Services, and she had the kind of profile that I wanted to attract to the office. She was smart. She went to Barnard College, went to Columbia Law School, had good experience in legal services. It showed that she had dedication to the community because she earned very little money, and yet you were doing some important things, basic things that were important to the lives of people. You know, landlord-tenant issues, domestic issues, finance issues, very important to the people. And so it was a source of pride and pleasure for me to interview Sheila and to see early on that this was a woman of talent and merit and commitment and dedication and real zeal to do good, to improve the world. And so I hired her, and she worked for 6 years in 2 different bureaus. She worked in the Civil Rights Bureau, had a very interesting case early on. Women, we were breaking new ground for women. And women were not bus drivers, and they became bus drivers in the MTA, and yet they were being impeded from the ability to move up, to become a bus dispatcher. And Sheila got a complaint about that, and we won a case that the MTA had to change its rules about how it would promote people to the position of bus dispatcher because it was really precluding women. And she went on to do some work in the Real Estate Finance Bureau. And then she went to work for the city as the general counsel for labor services for the city of New York. And shortly after that, 3 or 4 years into that job, I got a phone call from her. And she said, "Bob, a lot of my friends are encouraging me to run for judge, to become a judge. What do you think?" I said, "Sheila, what a fantastic idea. That would be great. You've got all the skills, you've got the background, you've got the commitment. I think that's a marvelous idea." She said, "Well, would you act as a reference for me?" I said, "Oh, Sheila, I'd be honored, be delighted." And that began a series of phone calls over many years, because Sheila became a civil court judge, a Supreme Court justice, a judge on the appellate division, and invariably there would be screening panels who would interview various candidates for these positions, whether they were for elective office for judge in the civil court or appointed. And I would always be on the end of the phone call, "I'm so-and-so from the screening panel, and can you tell me about Sheila Abdul Salam?" And then I would sing her praises, talk about how she would be a fantastic judge. And then she was serving at a very important level on the appellate division, first department. And she said, "You know, Bob," gave me a call one day, "it would be fantastic to be able to serve on the New York State Court of Appeals. And there's going to be an opening. And what do you think?" I said, "Sheila, go for it. You know, absolutely. You've got the background, you've got the experience. Absolutely." And so she said, "Well, would you act as a reference to me?" I said, "Sheila, I've been doing it all these years. Why not?" And I not only acted as a reference, but there came an opportunity. I was in Albany, and I was at a meeting, and the governor was there. And I went over on the side to the governor. I said, "You know, Governor, there's an appointment that you're going to make to the Court of Appeals. You got some outstanding candidates. I just want to let you know that there's a woman, Sheila Abdul Salam, who is a judge, and has had a very distinguished life and career, and I think it would be fantastic if you appointed her to the Court of Appeals. You'd also make history. She'd be the first African-American woman in the history of the state of New York to serve on the Court of Appeals." He said, "I know, Bob, I know. And the governor did the right thing and appointed her to that high court, and she distinguished herself there, bringing all of her values of her background and career, growing up in a very humble circumstance in Washington, D.C., modest financial circumstances, and she brought all of that commitment to her service on the Court of Appeals. So whether it's in the writings of the 81 opinions that she wrote or the 16 or 17 dissents, you found the passion and the commitment to civil rights, to tenants' rights, rights for people in the gay and lesbian community. I mean, she was out there on the highest court in the state of New York, as she had been throughout her life and career. And so we come tonight to remember her because of her tremendous accomplishments, and even more fundamentally because of the kind of gentle, wonderful, responsive human being that she was. The dean had indicated she couldn't say no to any request, to any good cause, and I certainly saw that up front. I saw how happy and fulfilled she was every inch of the way. I was proud that so many of my assistants had become judges over the years, and Sheila, when we had some alumni reunions, would be my person representing all the judges who were former assistant attorneys general to accept the certificates on behalf of all those that we were presenting that night. So she was always the beacon, for me, the symbol of success, the great granddaughter of a Virginia slave coming to the state of New York, serving all of its citizens in a historic role as the first African-American woman to serve on the Court of Appeals. We all come tonight to commemorate and remember a wonderful, wonderful woman, Sheila Abdul Salam.
Thank you, Bob. The next person to speak about Sheila knew her during their time together on the appellate division. Rolando Acosta, you can't get more Columbia than Rolando Acosta. You really can't. He and I went to the college together. I was a year ahead of him, but I don't think that explains the actual difference in the way we look. I don't know how much difference a year could make, but apparently a lot. Really, you and Venus must be taking the same vitamins. But anyhow, no, but Rolando, he went to the college, he went to the law school. More importantly, his daughter is a proud graduate of the law school. His wife is here today, which is great to see you, Vashti. The wedding reception was in Low Library. What more can you do? So, Rolando, why don't you talk to us a little bit about your time with Sheila on the appellate division?
Well, most of you know Sheila was my friend for over 30 years. I mean, we first met in law school, actually, through Sheila's classmate, Maria Sandoval, who was then going out with my classmate, Carlos Rodriguez Vidal. Of course, we follow very similar paths out of law school. She was at Legal Services. I was at the Legal Aid Society Civil Division. Then she was the general counsel at the Office of Labor Services in the Koch administration. I was in charge of enforcement at the City Human Rights Commission. Then, of course, we came back together in the judiciary during different times. And we were civil court judges, then Supreme Court judges. Then we came back together in 2008. I got to the appellate division in 2008, and she came in in 2009. And now, some of you have heard me speak about Sheila's dedication to public service and social justice, how she dedicated her life to impact the life of others, particularly those who were new in the profession. And I think Jillian alluded a little bit to that. She was always there, willing to talk to those eager law students who still had those lofty goals and visions of things larger than themselves. You remember those, George, Moselle, it's been a while. So, but what I tell them, and I wanted to concentrate my few minutes in just, to speak a little bit about Sheila as a brilliant thinker that she was, and the strategies when we worked together at the Appellate Division First Department. And I was trying to figure out, let me give him an example of that. And I think the most vivid example in my mind is when is Sheila's contributions to the Bennett decision, where the Appellate Division First Department reframed the application of the McDonnell-Douglas framework to city human rights law cases. As some of you know, especially Darrell, who I saw here early, who does employment work, we had developing a totally different new approach to anti-discrimination cases under the new statute, which is probably one of the most progressive pieces of civil rights legislation in the country. So, for example, we had eliminated the severe or pervasive doctrine that had been developed under Title VII because the court felt that that doctrine was an obstacle to women in the workplace, and it was inconsistent with a zero tolerance for discrimination policy that was embedded in the city human rights law. So in Bennett, we were considering discarding the much revered McDonnell Douglas framework because, in my view, it seemed inconsistent with the city human rights law and the principles and the protections that we were trying, that the law provided. So, of course, Sheila disagreed. One of the few times that we were on different sides, but she actually came in her usual quiet but brilliant way and tells me, bro, this was Sheila, always, bro. She tells me, if you chuck McDonnell Douglas, all people will focus on is how arrogant we are to follow, basically to throw away what has been effective U.S. Supreme Court precedent that has withstood the test of time. So, why don't we just, this is, her soft voice, can you hear her? Bro, why don't we just tweak the framework, particularly how we deal with that fourth element, of the test, dealing with the circumstances giving rise to an inference of discrimination. Of course, as I have for 30 years before that, I did what Sheila suggested. And the rest is history. People keep talking about how brilliant the new, and I authored the opinion, but people keep saying how the new revamped McDonnell Douglas framework under the city human rights law is so brilliant. Even the Second Circuit seems to like it a great deal. Even Jerry, right, who wrote about it, Jerry Lynch, our former professor. And of course, I don't have to tell you, it was all Sheila. It was all Sheila. We were in our passion wanting to basically do what we thought the better approach was. And Sheila always came back and, presented what proved to be an incredibly effective strategy and, a case that has now been affirmed by the Court of Appeals, by the Second Circuit, et cetera, all in honor to Sheila, because the case would have looked a lot different had it not been for that wisdom, for her way of approaching the law brilliantly, but also strategically. So I'll leave it at that. I don't want to.
Thank you, Rolando. So Jenny, you want to go next? So I want to introduce Jenny Rivera, who needs no introduction. Most of you know her from as a judge in the New York Court of Appeals. Lesser known are her abilities as an actor. When Jenny was an LLM student, we hired. Yes.
So unnecessary.
We hired her. Now, hired is, I'm not sure we ever paid her, but we hired her to serve as our client for interview exercises. And she was brilliant, and she gave our students a lot to work with, and I'm sure impressing them to this day. But we also now tell them when we've continued the custom of using an actor to portray a client, and we tell our students now that among the many reasons to respect your client is they might one day turn out to be a justice on the New York Court of Appeals. So,
So true.
watch your P's and Q's, right? So, be cool. So Jenny, why don't you talk a little bit about Sheila's time on the Court of Appeals?
Thank you. Thank you so much for that generous introduction. Bringing back a flood of memories. Good times, as they say, good times. And I did that when I was doing the LLM at Columbia. I forgot to mention that part of it. In any event, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I'm very pleased to be part of the panel. This is now, I guess, I don't know, maybe the third time that I have been asked to speak about Sheila before a group. It has weighed on me every single time. It has been a difficult chore every single time, as you can probably tell already. And I didn't know Sheila as long as the three panelists perhaps, to my left, as long as they did. I met Sheila in 2012 when we were both applying for the Court of Appeals. And Sheila and I were both on the list that was submitted to the governor. It would take the governor several more months before he was wise enough to recognize that she should be an appointee to the court. And I was very pleased to have her as my colleague to the left around our conference table. And I could talk about her intellect, but I don't think I need to do that with this group. You know her, you know how brilliant she was, how able she was. I thought I would share with you a little bit about her spirit on the Court of Appeals. It is a unique bond to be a member, a colleague on the High Court. It is a very difficult and challenging job. It is one that you do not shelve when the term is over. As I was quickly reminded my first summer when I asked Sheila, okay, so we met for lunch. I said, oh, what are you doing, over the break? And she goes, well, I've got this, I'm talking at this, I'm doing this. I said, Sheila, I thought we were on vacation. Yeah, I know. So you could see it, right? Going, yeah, I know, but it just I was asked, I can't say no, I really feel this. And you could just always tell that she was so committed to everyone else and ensuring that she was there for them. We've already talked about her being the first African-American woman appointed, so it's a historic appointment. And it is difficult being the first. I'm sure there are many firsts in this room, so you can appreciate that comment. But it is difficult being so visible when you are a very private person. It's very difficult and challenging to constantly being scrutinized. Every word you write, every comma where it goes, everything you say, everywhere you go, your very first oral argument, your investiture, because it has, in addition to meaning for the individual and for the community of those who love her and support her, it has, of course, that historic aspect to it. But Sheila carried that so well, one would never realize at any time that she was the first African-American woman on the court because she was so at ease and comfortable with herself on the court, which is so obvious from the very first day that she sat on the court. We've already talked a little bit about her temperament, but she was always so effective during her questioning. The questions were pointed but sensitive. So Sheila, of course, was someone who was able to find a way to bring in all of her experience to that inquiry from the bench. So the experience as a jurist, the experience as a lawyer, certainly around the conference table, she was never shy about bringing that experience to bear as she would talk about how she saw a case, whether she was reporting her own case and an opinion she was going to write or responding and commenting on any of her colleagues' points or opinions related to the cases that we were deciding. And so I loved her for that reason, that ability to really bring experience to the table, because it was an important voice that she brought as a former trial judge, as a public interest lawyer, which I shared in common with her, and I always enjoyed when we were in agreement, of course, and when we sparred, nevertheless. And it's quite the thing to be kind of punched in the nose by someone so gently and delicately around the conference table and say, did she just do that to me? Okay, well, I have to rethink that one then. But that was Sheila. So I think I'll just, as I said, this has always been a difficult point of conversation. So many of you know Sheila from, I think, different points in life, and many of you may not know her at all. So I'll just share some more of the humanity of our beloved Sheila Abdul Salam. You've already heard some of it. It's clear that she was deeply committed to individuals, not just to institutions, deeply committed to Columbia as an institution, but deeply committed to the individuals and certainly to students of color. I don't have enough hands to count the number of mentees that I've got this mentee, I've got this lunch, I've got this dinner with this mentee's got a call, and she always had someone that she was ensuring that she was either emailing, speaking with personally, seeing personally. Again, I thought we were on vacation. always available to them. And it was very clear that while it was something that she took on as an obligation, she saw that as her role, and this is before her appointment to the Court of Appeals, obviously, but continued throughout. She also really took great pleasure and joy in it. She was so energized by the success of these individuals, and in Sheila's typical way, she would never take credit for any of that success. But of course, I knew that she was helping them every step of the way, that in her way she was giving guidance, whether it's to a colleague on the bench or a student who's just thinking about going to law school, in her way, really giving guidance and assistance, that it was clear that she was really helping them along and making it possible for them to go on this professional and personal journey. And as I say, with every success, the smile was just from ear to ear, which is another wonderful thing about Sheila. You talked about the dancing. I never really got to watch her dance, but she had an incredible smile, and she really lit the room with that smile. And that was part of sort of the grace and wonder of this particular jurist. So she was that way with her mentees, always effusive about them, was humble about herself, but never humble about praising everyone else, which was really such a wonderful part of Sheila. And Sheila was also the first person who'd ask, "How are you doing?" She'd remember details of your life, even those details I might want to forget about my own at times, I have to admit. But details of your life, about my own partner. Oh, how's his mother? She knew that she was sick at one point. How's he doing? How's she doing? And in a real genuine and authentic way, I was not bringing up the conversation she was asking. We'd go on and on about it. I'd ask about her family, and she'd tell me about what was going on with her family. And so that was, I think, very special, because again, it's easy to be caught up in everything that's going on with yourself and to forget someone's name, and she never did, to remember details about personal experiences, to be able to bond on an experience without trying to take over the conversation, because Sheila was not that kind of a person, sort of take over and lard the conversation with her own successes, all about herself. It was always about the other person at the table. And the conversation was one that was very joyous, and one, again, that was about sharing about herself, which I think, again, there are very few people who are that kind of personality. So she was really wonderful that way. And of course, when she found her true love, and she shared about getting married and her marriage, you could see, again, that smile from ear to ear. But again, that real specialness about a personal relationship, about giving in that relationship and receiving in that relationship. So it was very unique, Greg. Certainly every conversation about you was a pleasant one. Those were not details to forget. But always with great pride and great joy that she had found someone. I don't think it's late in life myself, but others seem to think it's late in life, that nevertheless could share the great joy of being on the Court of Appeals, where her achievements, and yet who she really was as a person. So really, I was so happy to see her so happy herself. And I understand she finally was taking vacation, so thank you for that too, because she really was a workaholic. The other very sweet memory I have of Sheila was after both of us were appointed. You know, she was a historic appointment, of course, as first African-American woman, as we said. But also, when she was appointed, it meant it was the first time that two women of color sat on the Court of Appeals. And it was very meaningful for me to have sort of this sisterhood of the bench, if you will. Even when we disagreed, we were always sisters in a certain way on this bench. But she was always so lovely, because it really is an intense process being on the court. It's a compressed schedule when we're up in session. There's not really time to spare. But Sheila, whatever hour you called her, and she could be in chambers at 6 in the morning, she could be in chambers at 1 in the morning, you call her and I'd say, "Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you." She'd go, "No, it's fine. What do you want to talk about?" And she always made herself available. So I remember one time when literally we had maybe 30 minutes before oral argument, and we had been a little bit delayed, and we had scheduled lunch. And I called her and I said, no, I'm coming over. And she came over with her tray, and we had this nice lunch, and she's never looking at the watch, and yet we both knew that there were very few minutes left. But that was Sheila. And again, it's sort of those small things when a colleague does put out time for you, does listen to you. When I've emailed her or called her for the 7th time on a case and said, would you just look one more time? Can you maybe see your way? And I'm thinking, oh, she's just going to tell me no, and I'm even afraid of how she'll say it to me. I'll finally have found a way to get Sheila angry. And she would always come back and say, of course I'll look at it one more time. I didn't flip her, by the way. But she'd say, of course I'll look at it one more time. But I knew that she did. And sometimes she would agree with me on the change of language. But again, that was, the kind of colleague that you want on the bench. Someone who's open, even again if you're asking for the 7th time and there's not much time left to make these changes, but someone who's open, someone who's engaged, someone who thinks of you as a human being and asks about your personal life, but also engages with you on that very high intellectual level about the nitty-gritty of a case, about the writing, about the approach. And when she agrees with you, she agrees with you, and when she doesn't, she doesn't. But I always felt that I got, as they say, a fair hearing before beloved Judge Sheila Abdul Salam. So I'm really pleased to be here today, and I look forward to hearing your stories about Sheila. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. So the last person who's going to talk on this question will be another colleague from the Court of Appeals, Rowan Wilson.
Thankfully, Professor Johnson has no dirt on me.
I'm just not going to
Give him time. Give him time.
Sheila Abdul Salam was a magnificent judge. And I say that not because of her scholarship or erudition, knowledge or diligence, but because of her empathy and deep understanding of the human condition. King Solomon's judgment was not based on law books and statutes, but on his recognition that a true mother would rather give up her baby than see him cut in half. There's a Japanese folk tale in which the fabled Judge Uka resolves the same problem in a slightly different way. He pretends to have the gift of prophecy and tells the two women that he had a vision that the baby is going to meet with an accident and will need to be supported for the rest of his life by the mother working in the rice paddies. One woman immediately disclaims the baby. The other says the prophecy didn't matter to her. The pound of flesh in The Merchant of Venice is taken from a Moroccan folk tale in which a young man makes a deal with a wealthy merchant, borrowing money which he will use for business but will repay with a pound of flesh if his business fails. When it fails, and he is lamenting his fate outside the palace, where he'll be judged by the king, the princess learns of his plight, disguises herself as a lawyer, and argues his case to her father, arguing that the pound of flesh must be taken exactly, not more or less, in one stroke. When the merchant says he cannot possibly do so, the princess proposes that all will be better for everyone if the merchant takes the young man to work for him, trains him in business, and allows the man to repay the debt in that way. The king agrees, demands to know who the unfamiliar lawyer is at first enraged that it's his daughter, but later asks her to sit at his side and judge all cases with him. And the kingdom thereafter was ruled with more kindness than justice requires. Sheila possessed those legendary qualities in a superabundance. In every case, from the most wrenching criminal or family court cases to the driest commercial cases, she imagined herself in the positions of the parties, wrestled with their troubles as if they were her own, and when she spoke, softly, we all listened carefully. Her empathy, sensitivity, and compassion pervaded all she did. As soon as I was nominated, she called me to say how excited she was to have me as her little brother on the Court of Appeals. After my very first court conference, when there were two cases in which it looked as if I would be the lone dissenter, a great way to enter the Court of Appeals, she stopped into my chambers to ask if I was okay, saying that I'd looked upset during conference. In one of those cases, after I circulated my draft dissent, she again dropped into my office and visited me to tell me she thought it was very persuasive, although she wasn't going to change her vote. But she would write separately as a way of encouraging future litigants to take a run at the issue I'd raised. Sheila cared deeply not just for the litigants and her colleagues, but for everyone, from the court staff to total strangers. She and my oldest daughter, Isabel, had a lengthy discussion about Isabel's college applications and Sheila's college experiences, during the course of which she learned the date on which Isabel would hear on her early admission application from NYU. When that day came, we were both in Albany. Sheila called me to ask if Isabel had heard from NYU. I had been so busy with work that I'd forgotten the date of my own daughter's admission decision, but Sheila had remembered, and then she sent Isabel a lovely note. Fundamentally, Sheila was a great judge because she was a great person. There's a sense in which Sheila's prodigious gifts were innate and droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven. However, even if the rest of us must strain to approach her extraordinary measure of kindness, thoughtfulness, and compassion, we should periodically remind ourselves that it costs us very little to be concerned about others, and doing so blesseth him that gives and him that takes. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for those wonderful words. The last question that we'll put to the panel is in the spirit of invoking Sheila's spirit. We all, those of us who knew her, feel her presence in a gathering like this. And I ask the panel to say a few words about what they imagine Sheila would be saying to us right now. So, Bob, if you want to begin.
Well, given the difficult times in which we are living, I think she would say, continue the struggle and keep the faith. That's what her life was all about, a set of values, a set of commitments, never forgetting who she was, where she came from, what the potential of a human being is, what the potential of this extraordinary democracy is, recognizing some of the flaws and weaknesses, but yet at the same time the strengths that are there. So she would be encouraging us. Keep at it, keep the faith, continue the struggle. We need it now more than ever. And hopefully her life, who she was, what she was all about, will pass on that enduring message to each of us.
I thought about this because, I can hear Sheila, my daughter Zila, who Conrad mentioned, Columbia College and law school, was a mentee of Sheila. And always heard that wisdom from Sheila about, the nobility of the professions, the difficulties that one encounters in the profession. So if Sheila were here, I think that she would tell you, particularly the younger members of the profession in the audience, that the best way to highlight the nobility of the profession is to never forget the importance of contribution, of impacting the life of others the way that she did, particularly those who had difficulty accessing justice. She will say that, while the prestige or financial concerns are legitimate, and we know how difficult that can be for law students these days, the desire to make a difference or serve others should be paramount in your life. That she will tell you that authentic success is measured not by the toys that we accumulate, but by the joy that we derive from the service to justice and the very idealistic goals that brought us into the profession in the first place. So,
Thank you. Jenny?
Thank you. So Judge Abdus Salam was a person of great integrity and a person of conscience. And I think that she would say, be true to yourself, have integrity in everything that you do. Do not be afraid to take a position that is not the position of others in the room. Walk in your shoes, confident that you are doing the right thing. Do not look to others to give you a sense of self. Make your determination based on what you know is right, because Sheila had a deep sense of what was right and just. And certainly there were times when there were cases that she wished they had come out the other way, but she was a person of integrity, and she did what she felt was right and just in every single case. If that meant she was in the majority and others agreed with her, that's fine. If that meant she was the lone dissenter, that was fine too. We'd all like to win, by the way, but she understood that if others were slow to see the wisdom of her view, time would certainly make its way her way. And I'm sure that will be true in the future. So I think at one point she may have said this to you, Rowan. I think she said in a conference at one point, you got to do what you got to do.
That was a good saying.
So I think she'd say to you right now, get on with it.
Rowan.
So, most of you know this. Maya Angelou wrote, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." I don't know if Sheila would tell any of us this directly, but I think what she would encourage us to do in a more subtle way is to try and make people feel good the way that she did. You only had to meet her once to remember for the rest of your life how she made you feel.
Thank you all for these nice words. They help bring her into this gathering in a way that I think means a lot to those of us who know her, and probably to those of you who didn't have the benefit of meeting her. The last time I saw Sheila, it was a Friday morning, early in the morning. I teach a 3-hour class that goes into the evening on Thursday evening, so getting up on Friday morning is not my favorite thing. But I said, you know what? It was the Empowering Women of Color Conference, and she was the keynote speaker, and it was probably 2 weeks before she passed. I said, let me get up. I haven't seen Sheila in a while. Let me go see her. And so I have the benefit of knowing what she might say to you, because I heard her speak. And what she talked about was her life and the things she did, the so many mentees that she worked with, although she wouldn't mention that, but the many organizations of which she was a part, the people that she served, the history of her public service, and the benefits to her of contributing to others. It wasn't charity for her, it was something that fed her, and she encouraged the students to be similarly fed in their work. And I know that that's what she did, because she led by example. And I think she wasn't one to say, do this or don't do that. As the panelists have all said, she was very gentle in her approach, but she led by example. And so we want to continue with her example and spend the rest of our evening doing what she would want us to do, which is to build our community. She cared so much about the Columbia Law School community and our connections to one another, and so now is a time for us to reconnect and enjoy each other's company. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for your work.